Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. It's been so much fun to meet many of you throughout the day. It's been inspiring to talk about all the potential of customer engagement. I want to talk a little bit about what can get in the way, what goes wrong, despite our best intentions, despite all the great technology you've been hearing about, despite all the great customer data. Why do we so often end up on this customer road to nowhere? And I'm going to start with just a quick story. This happened to me not too long ago. I walked into the kitchen. Our dishwasher, right next to the dishwasher, the floor was covered with soapy bubbles. And as I walked up to the dishwasher, the little display light was flashing the letters F-U at me. And it took Google for me to realize that stood for failed unit. How the manufacturer didn't see that coming, I think, is a sign of some of the myopia that can happen a little bit when you work on a brand a little too closely. But it became somewhat emblematic as I found myself on a customer journey. And we all are marketers, but we're all also customers and consumers, and we're on these customer journeys. And I found myself, it looks like we need a new dishwasher. Searching leads to clickbait. Sites not optimized for mobile. Overwhelmed by choice. Sifting through fake reviews. Unclear tech specs. Looking for a number to call. Waiting on hold. Endless retargeting ads. We may have to get used to washing these by hand. Maybe you wonder why is it this way? There's so many forms of this. Earlier on we saw the chaos drawing of what can happen with customer experience when it breaks down. Why does that happen? Here's somebody sleeping, his phone starts going off, keeps buzzing, finally wakes him up, having trouble sleeping, $5 off nighttime sleep aid liquid caps. Here's poor Waldo. Another irrelevant offer. It's like they have no idea where I am in the customer journey. And then, of course, all the different channels on email. Just for you, a special offer. Social, based on your likes, a special offer. Display, don't miss this very special offer. And then you go to their website. What do you want? That disconnect that can happen despite, again, the great tools and technology and data that we have access to. After we bought our dining room table, the furniture store kept sending us deals on other dining room tables. And this is one of my personal pet peeves. Your order has shipped. Your order is on a truck. Your order is still on a truck. Your order thinks you care about every little update. Your order wants to interrupt whatever you're doing. Your order is out for delivery. Your order has been delivered. Your order is waiting for you. Next time we buy dental floss, I'm going to the store. What took you so long? And then, of course, you bring it in, and it asks you, how was your delivery experience? How was your toothbrush, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Why does this continually sort of fall flat? I drew this cartoon a couple of years ago at the start of COVID. Digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon as this COVID-19 wrecking ball comes from the side. And it's a wrecking ball that I think we all experienced viscerally, but definitely in the marketing community, because suddenly the expectations were that much higher, and all the things that we're starting to work with, how do you deliver on customer experience in much more immersive way, but it keeps falling down. And the reality is, it's not the only wrecking ball that's come along. Just in the last 3 years, we had a big Web3 wrecking ball, and then more recently, of course, ChatGPT. We don't have to change, but we are changing. And so there's constant change. Being a marketer, it's not for the faint of heart, because there are constant changes. How do you keep up to pace with all of those changes? And how do you keep delivering on something on customer experience when there's so much friction in the way? Let's transform our entire business using the generative AI I just used to write a poem about my dog. This one is particularly interesting because unlike a lot of the wrecking balls that come along, unlike a lot of the technology that we get excited about, the shiny new things that were talked about earlier, this is something that everybody in the organization, even the tech phobic, are aware of. I heard ChatGPT described as akin to what Netscape was to the internet. ChatGPT is to AI. Because the internet had been around for a while, but suddenly Netscape opened up the eyes of everyone on what the internet could be. And that's what ChatGPT is. It's really exciting. You'll have people all across your organization talking about it and playing with it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to apply it in the marketing realm or to the tools that we have to do it in a way that's actually going to be additive to customer experience. So it's a challenge. We find ourselves a lot of exciting technology, and sometimes our organization's struggling to keep up. And we talked about a number of those ways throughout the day. Scott Brinker, who many of you know, described a conundrum I find really interesting, that technology changes exponentially, organizations change logarithmically. Between those two things, there's a lot of friction, and the marketing role, in a way, is right at the center of that. You have this exponential growth, you have organizations changing slowly. That's where a lot of the bumps in the road happen, and I think it leads to a lot of what can happen in customer experiences that break down. In a lot of ways, I kind of think of us in a perpetual, awkward adolescent stage where we have all this potential, but we're just tripping over our clumsy feet. And it takes a lot of ongoing effort for us to continue to get better at it. And it's going to be a form of progress, not perfection. But along that journey, I think our mindsets need to evolve to keep pace with the technology. Our mindsets need to evolve to a place where we can take full advantage of all of the tools that we have. Because if we take the latest tools and our mindset hasn't quite caught up, we're going to leave customer experiences that fall a little bit flat. This year, we're disrupting how we do marketing. Didn't we do that last year? No, last year we transformed marketing. No, that was 2 years ago. Oh, right, we're reinventing marketing. It's about time. This dynamic does not change. This is where we are, and it's an exciting place to be because it's constantly in a state of flux. But the core fundamentals are the same. And so much has been advised earlier about not getting too excited about the shiny new thing and thinking about the fundamentals. That'll enable us to be more effective with all the new things that come along so that we actually can create a real impact and customer experiences that don't break down. So a little bit about me and my background, because I have kind of an unusual background for a cartoonist. I dreamed about being a cartoonist when I was a kid. I told somebody earlier today, if you'd asked me when I was 8 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'd be a cartoonist. But my life took a detour. In the late 90s, I worked in early internet marketing for building early stage websites for companies like Disney and Starwood. I found myself at Harvard Business School where we had a student newspaper, and I thought, oh, I can fulfill this childhood dream about drawing cartoons. So I did that for 2 years in business school, and then I graduated, and I started drawing marketing cartoons. And it basically just tracked along my day job. I kind of set a pattern for myself to draw a cartoon a week. It helped me to be a little bit more creative, to talk about the things that were going on in my life. And I went everywhere from General Mills to Nestle. I was at Method. I was interim chief marketing officer at a tech company called Hotel Tonight. And all along, the cartoons sort of tracked along my journey. And this last October, I reached 20-year anniversary of drawing these weekly cartoons, which my 8-year-old self would have been very proud of. Thank you. And I do a form of this more or less full-time, which is pretty interesting to see how cartoons can work in lots of different ways. One big side benefit, which I discovered, is that there really is a need for humor in what we do. I found early on when I was drawing these cartoons at General Mills in a big cubicle environment. There's somebody here, an alum of General Mills. So I was in this big cubicle environment on 4BT in the bell tower. And I would draw these cartoons. And at that period, I would send them out during the workday. And I noticed that I would send it out and people's heads would sort of pop up. And they'd first wonder if I was going to get fired. And then, and then they would talk about whatever cartoon I had drawn and the issue. And we realized that we were all going through the same stuff, and sometimes we're a little bit hesitant to call out things that get in the way, things that aren't working quite right. But humor, in a way, gave us a little bit of permission to do it, and I found that there was actually a benefit to it, despite the fact I ended up working at some places where it wasn't quite as appreciated. One of my managers told me if he ever ended up in a cartoon that I'd be fired. So I waited until after I left that company, and then I had a lot of runway of material to work with. But I found that it really can be a valuable leadership skill. We don't always think about it that way. And a couple of years ago, I got invited to be a part of the first ever MBA level course on the power of humor in business. These are the two professors and a rubber chicken. And it's one of the most heavily subscribed courses at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. They asked me to be their cartoonist in residence, which was a great honor and fun to learn about humor in an academic way. And one of the things I took away from this course is something they described as the humor cliff. They had all this data looking at the number of times an average person laughs in the course of a day. And they said that as you get into the workforce, it starts to fall and fall and fall until a few years after retirement, and it creeps back up. And their big message is, don't fall off the humor cliff. We need it. It can allow us to talk about things. And it's something that I definitely work in as a cartoonist, but I think all of us have the potential to use humor in a self-deprecating way to point at things that aren't happening right in our organizations and how they could work a little bit better. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to walk through sort of 4 different observations I have on customer experience. why it can break down, and why we sometimes end up on this customer journey to nowhere. So the first idea, consistent with a lot of earlier speakers, is that technology alone can't deliver engagement. It can be a great amplifier for it. It can be incredibly exciting, but it can't do it alone. And here's the marketing tech stack that I envision. Now we've invested in this marketing tech stack. What's the ROI? There's a literal kitchen sink up in there. That's a good question for a new analytics tool we should buy. Yes, and a new layer for data visualization. We can sometimes in this shiny new object syndrome mentality think that all we need is the next tool and that's going to do the job for us. Have you figured out how AI will impact our business? Working on it. How will AI impact our business? There are many ways that AI can impact our business. How did you get budget approval for all this? I just told them the name of the project. And then you've seen this one earlier from Rusty. This year will be all about AI. Yes, and podcasts. Yes, and nano influencers. Yes, and social commerce. Yes, and blockchain. Yes, and voice search. Yes, and live video. Shouldn't we talk about our strategy first? Silence. Anyway, this will also be the year of VR. I obviously drew that a couple of years ago when we were in the middle of this. Welcome to our brand experience in the metaverse. I'm sure consumers will show up any minute now. Here's a cartoon I drew a few years ago. Somebody's in the airport, all the flights have been canceled. Honey, just be patient. The hotel brand I'm loyal to isn't optimized for mobile. Honey? She said to say she left you for another brand. And in the midst of all the exciting new tech, where there's never been more potential of things we can do, our customers and consumers, their expectation level is getting pretty high too. And so if you're not meeting the basics, you're kind of dropping the ball. This cartoon was inspired by a piece of research from Google a few years ago. They found that people are more loyal to their need in the moment than they are to any particular brand. That's really interesting, and that I think raises the bar for all of us, because it's easier than ever to shift based on needs in the moment and understanding what those are and how we can really think about that as a way to hold on to our customers and retain them and also find new customers. And I love stories of brands that have to punch a little bit harder than their weight because they don't have the marketing dollars of larger brands, and really understanding unique needs in the moment and delivering on them in ways better than other brands can be a really interesting exercise for you to think about. How do we not just cover the basics and do what everybody's doing, but how do we think of a unique insight and then find the right technology to enable us to deliver on those needs? And this is one of my favorite case studies, even though it's a few years old. Red Roof Inn, hotel chain all across the US. They're not necessarily like the Starwood or the Hilton, but they do have a unique benefit to their brand, which is that they're located near a lot of airports. And so they had this insight that there's this entire customer need of people who did not expect they would have to stay the night in a hotel, but their flights have been canceled. And so how do they think about that need? And it was important for them because when they were doing buying keywords, they were up against Starwood and Hilton and all the bigger companies. They realized you can't out Starwood. They're always going to beat you on keywords. So their insight was how do we leverage this need in the moment? And maybe we only focused on that use case I showed in that previous cartoon of somebody in an airport, all the flights have been canceled. And they only primarily focused on this type of a use case as a big campaign where they would tie algorithms with flight cancellation data and weather data and pitch ads based on that particular use case. Flight canceled, Red Roof has you covered with rooms only 3 miles away. And I think that's such a great, simple, very basic insight applied with some technology to deliver upon it. And they had great success with this campaign. It allowed them to differentiate themselves. It allowed them to pull people who may not otherwise be in the brand into the brand and then take it off from there. And I just love the idea of thinking of needs in the moment, which has come up a lot today. And how do you think not only what the needs in the moment on the customer journey are, but how do you find needs in the moment that are unique to your brand that you can actually create some differentiation and over-index on certain ones that can create that can allow you to punch harder than your weight? And they're always shifting. During COVID, the idea of being able to check into your room without having to talk to people, that's a shifting need in the moment. They're always shifting. And a lot of hotel brands were experimenting with digital journeys to kind of heavy up on that. And so that's something we always have to be attuned with. What are these needs and how do we deliver on them better than others could? I love the idea of ordering room service and seeing your hamburger come to your room. So this is a quote I really love from this former CEO of Diageo. It's not about doing digital marketing, it's about marketing effectively in a digital world. And that's another mindset shift, I think, that can allow us to take more advantage of all the tools that we have. Okay, second idea I want to share is the idea of being aware and bewaring of customer funnel vision. In an attempt to understand the needs in the moment, in an attempt to understand our customers, if we're not careful, we're going to look at our customers like this. Units on a transactional path to purchase. And the customer funnel can be really useful. A lot of tools like this can be really useful. But you end up with awareness. Do whatever drives the most traffic, like listicles about cats. Relentlessly harass them with marketing automation. Trick them with a bait and switch offer. And then hope they promote your brand to all their friends. And in reality, someone is in this world looking at, you are here. Actually, I'm just looking for the bathroom. Our actual customers are complex humans like all of us. They're not thinking about our brands all the time. And how do we talk to them in a way that's not purely thinking about them in this need-to-moment kind of focus? Because you end up with this transactional path to purchase mentality that can be like marketing myopia, and you miss opportunities on how you can actually provide utility to your customers, even when they're not really thinking about your brand, even when it may not lead directly to a purchase, but something that can build affinity for your brand. And when this doesn't happen, it's really obvious. We're testing new digital ad formats that are harder to ignore. If you're only optimizing for growth marketing tactics, you can create experiences that can fundamentally be antithetical to a great customer experience. If you've tried to unsubscribe from a marketing newsletter, you can see what I mean. Tap link marked unsubscribe. There it is in 4-point white font on a white background. Verify your identity. Email, name, password, street where your uncle lived in 1994. Manage your preferences. Pause only for an hour. Only send 1 email per day. Unsubscribe to this email, but keep all your others going. Give feedback. Why would you like to unsubscribe? I don't like to save money. I'm an idiot. All of the above. Confirm. Are you sure you're a quitter? And then you get a 404 error. And there's a reason this sort of happens, because if you're optimizing for certain metrics, it will lead you to this path. And that can be part of that myopia where we ignore the big picture. We ignore what can really happen. Careful, the last content was full of marketing. I think my Nest smoke alarm is going off. Google AdWords just pitched me a fire extinguisher and offer for temporary housing. And the reality is, if you actually scanned our customers' brains, they're not thinking about your brand all the time. They're thinking about my husband, my kids, my career, my friends. I don't see our brand of pickle relish anywhere. But it's a part of marketing myopia. The longer we work on a brand, the more we think that we're going to be in there somewhere. They are thinking about us sometimes. And the reality is not even our brand loyalists are sort of at that point. And so it's important to kind of reset our expectations. I've always loved this quote from Ted Levitt, who was a Harvard Business School professor, a legendary Harvard Business School professor, that people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. And the reality is, they're not even thinking about a 1/4-inch hole. They're thinking, I have a frame I want to put on my wall. That's what they're thinking about, And too often, we're marketing the drill. And we miss out on opportunities on how we can provide real utility to our customers as a way forward. Here's one of my favorite examples. This is just a typical consumer brand that's typically marketing, doing buy one, get one free offers, and the typical things, typical tool of tricks to keep people engaged with their brands. But they took a step back and they thought, what are needs in the moment for our customers that don't involve buying a roll of toilet paper right now? And they ended up creating this app for a period of time, which I found really interesting. It was an app that called Sit or Squat, and you could pull up in any particular city, and it would show you clean restrooms. You don't want to go to one that's marked in red. And I love the idea of a toilet paper brand thinking along these lines, because it's not just the retail environment, it's not the zero moment of truth. It's actually like, we have customers, they buy toilet paper, sometimes they're out there and they need help. And we as a brand can stand for that. And I found that as a really useful example of what is needed at the moment, how can we can create some traction that can use some technology to deliver on that need in the moment. And again, this is a little bit of an older example, but there's a lot of these that come up all the time. And then of COVID, it became particularly relevant when it was really hard. So there are ways that our brands can fulfill some utility for our audiences if we take a step back and think about the right way to deliver some value. We finally found a way to get people to engage with our content. Last toilet reference, I think. Okay, third idea I want to share with you is the idea that bad personalization is worse than no personalization. That came up earlier today as well in the context of hyper-personalization. Not every experience needs to be hyper-personalized. And sometimes when things misfire, it's because we were so heavily focused on delivering a personalized experience when that wasn't what was called for. And yet we're in this world where the holy grail of marketing has always been right person, right message, right time. Right person, right message, wrong time. Looks like we have some work to do. And so now we're getting to a place where increasingly it's possible to think about right message, right person, right message, right time. How do we think about doing that in a way that's actually additive to the experience? Actually, in an effort to personalize, it's bringing some value to them. Bad personalization is worse than no personalization. This brand newsletter just called me first name instead of Virginia. Macchiato for vagina? Only a couple letters off. It was really close. And a lot of when personalization falls down, it's because it was kind of close. Rusty shared earlier that example of going on a vacation. He's originally, from West Virginia, kind of close, but then you show a gun ad and it's not what he was looking for. Those disconnects can be really harsh, but it's easy to make those kind of mistakes. And I drew this cartoon just this week on riffing on this idea, the different ways to do personalization that are wrong. Just the name. Sarah, we have amazing deals, Sarah, just for you, Sarah. Superficial. I noticed it was 76 degrees Fahrenheit today in Santa Fe where you live. I always find that a little bit creepy. Since you're over 40, here are offers for assisted living. Since you're a spontaneous adventurer, would you like to buy a motorcycle? And the data is based on before he had a baby Bjorn on his chest. Creepy. Browsing toilets. Get ready for nonstop toilet ads wherever you go for weeks. And then the last one. Even though you shop here a lot, here's the same experience we give everyone. And I think a lot of brands just miss the basics. Here's our entire unfiltered product catalog of you shopped here all the time. We're missing out on the zero data opportunities because we're so focused on, well, until recently, third-party data opportunities. And so I think there's a lot of value in just sort of rethinking how we think about personalization. In 1970, believe it or not, the term uncanny valley was coined. This idea, which some of you may be familiar with, that as you're working and trying to develop human-like experiences, there's a point at which, over time, as the technology gets better, it delivers on value. And then there's a point where you get to a place where actually it creeps people out. You end up like, in the case of robots, it looks almost human, but not quite, and you're like, that's really creepy. The movie, the Polar Express, was kind of in that vein. It was a Christmas movie. The reviews all talked about how creepy this animation style was, because it was kind of close, but kind of creepy. And I feel like a lot of what happens in personalization when it goes wrong is a bit of an uncanny valley situation for personalization. And until we're using the technology in the right way, it can creep a lot of people out. And I think we have to be careful of that because we have a lot of access to data. It's easy to make those kind of mistakes, being careful. This image shows up in a lot of marketing presentations from the famous movie Minority Report. And it's interesting to me, it has the character walking through a futuristic mall, and his eyes are scanned, his retina scanned, and there are personalized ads based on him. And it amazes me how many times I see this in a marketing context, and it's framed as a utopian future, and then you see it in the media, and it's framed as a complete dystopia. And that disconnect, I think we need to be aware of to make sure that when we're delivering on personalization, we're doing it in a way that's additive. I drew a cartoon kind of based on that. His character name was John Anderton. John Anderton, how are your hemorrhoids? John Anderton, still struggling with incontinence? John Anderton, are you ready for the next Danielle Steele? Don't worry, it's only marketers collecting our personal data so they can create more relevant advertising for us. So this is obviously a state of flux. We all know the famous example of Target 10 years ago predicting whether people were expecting a baby, and a marketing offer was sent to the father of a teenager, and that got a lot of national news stories. But I think it's important to pay attention to that, because that's where some of this stuff can lead if we don't put the brakes on and think what's really additive and provides value. And so it's instructive, this move towards zero-party data. The gym shoes you liked in our survey are on sale. Great. That's awesome. First-party data. The gym shoes you browsed last year are on a sale. OK. Second-party data. I hear you have a new gym membership. Need any shoes? Wait, what? Third-party data. Maybe you wouldn't have skipped your workout today if you had new shoes. So finding our right place in that continuum, I think, is really important. And I'm inspired by brands that use data in a way that is that actually builds to their brand, partly in what they don't do. So Bloom & Wild is a florist company in the UK. They've been using data for a long time. And partly looking at their data, they realized that there was a whole buying occasion for Grandparents' Day. It allowed them to unlock a lot of potential, exciting things for their customers, because they were able to deliver on those specific needs in the moment that they found by looking at the data. But they were also the first brand to have an opt-out for Mother's Day. And they did it before this was commonplace. This insight, it must be horrible not to have a mom and be bombarded by excessive Mother's Day marketing. That's a beautiful insight, and it's been interesting to watch so many brands jump on that bandwagon as an insight. And my message today is not necessarily that insight, but find insights like that, where sometimes we can find ways we can deliver value by what we don't do, rather than just how we can find a way to connect with them to try to drive a path to purchase. Okay, the fourth point, the final point I want to share with you today is the idea that marketing is too important to be left to the marketing department. This was a quote famously from Bill Hewlett of Hewlett and Packard years ago. But I think it's really relevant, and I think it's particularly relevant in a marketing conference. How do we bring along the rest of the organization? That came up a few times today. It's not just about the what, the technology. It's about the who and the how. How do we bring the organizations along? Because we all know what happens when that breaks. I placed an order on your website, and it still hasn't shipped. Well, it could be a problem with our web team, or our technical team, or our fulfillment team, or our inventory team, or our payment team. But I can't access their system, so there's no way to tell. Aren't you all part of the same team? No, I'm only in charge of excellent customer service. I had the opportunity, we talked a lot about how to bring the customer into the room earlier today. A few years ago, I was working for Method, a soap company, consumer products company, and I was responsible for helping launch the brand in the UK. So we arrived there, set up an office, had a small team, and then we ran into a problem that our customer service line, the number that rings when you call the bottle, in the US we had a call center, but it wouldn't adapt to where we were. And so we had this period of time where we weren't sure how we could actually respond to customers. And so we did the experiment early in the brand days that we would actually have a phone in our office where the number from an actual consumer would ring, and then all 10 of us would take turns talking to customers. It was not scalable. I don't recommend it in a lot of ways. And yet, there was something for all of us who were part of this early brand team, literally bringing the customer into the room, that actually was quite instructive. One minute you're working on your brand plan for the next quarter, and the next minute you're talking to Nigel from Edinburgh who has a stain in his granite countertop he needs help with. It kind of makes it real, because too often we can get caught in a bit of a marketing ivory tower, and it kind of brings the actual customer into the room. It was a valuable exercise, and it helped along the lines. This was our supply chain person. It helped when we were talking about cross-functional activities, that everybody in the cross-functional team in some way had actually talked to customers. I think there are ways to do that creatively for our brands. How do we bring actual customers into the room? I interviewed at Apple years ago, and I was struck by an interview that I had where the vice president interviewing me told me that almost every weekend he took a 4-hour shift at his local Apple store and put on the t-shirt and talked to actual customers. And I was like, that is really interesting. It forces you to kind of get out of that zone. And of course, one of the more famous examples, Zappos, they have an award in their company for who can talk to the customer the longest. The winner was 11 hours and 44 minutes. And it's less that was a productive ROI, and more symbolically in the organization what that demonstrated to everybody else about where the customer was, and that the customer was really in the room. And how do you adapt to that? How do you break this silo mindset? How can we be more customer-centric? I'd like to help, but that's not my department. Mine neither. Good luck. The path of least resistance is getting stymied by that. And so thinking creatively for ways that others in our organization can feel like they're part of the team, I think is a really important and valuable exercise. And I do think humor can help. Here's an example. Actually, I had a chance to work with this organization, DBS Bank in Singapore. They're a very large bank there. They were on a digital transformation journey. They were trying to have better customer experiences. They did research in the market, and one of their nicknames in Singapore is damn bloody slow. Not good point of feedback. And I had a chance to work with some of their team as they were like, we want to talk about some of what's getting in the way. We find that in our organization, people have a tough time, pointing at the things that are getting in the way of us delivering better experiences. Maybe humor can be a way to do that. So I had a chance to get involved, and we did a lot of research with people in the company. I noticed we kept hearing the same word over and over again, scolded. If I make a mistake, my manager is going to scold me. I'm worried if I go out of my functional area to talk to another group, I'm going to be scolded. And I found that really an interesting word. And so as we were talking about it with the team, I said, well, what do you think about, what does the word scolded make you think about? And one of the vice presidents in the room, one of the more senior people in the room, stood up and he walked in the corner and he crouched like this. This was a photo of him in the corner. And it popped this bubble. Everyone started laughing because apparently in Singapore, if you're a student and you misbehave, it's a common thing for the teacher to have you do this. Everybody thought it was really funny. But more importantly, the fact that the most senior person in the room showed that it was OK to laugh at some of the situation, it allowed them to kind of talk about ways to move forward. I ended up drawing a cartoon with that feature. Does anyone else have a hypothesis they'd like to test? We had a whole series of things where we would actually talk to teammates and talk about how to move forward. And I feel like there's a form of that all of us can think about. How do you allow other people in your organization to feel like they're part of the larger customer experience? I'm curious, how many of you know what this photo is? If you bought the very first Apple Macintosh back in 1984 and you took the hood off of the Mac, you'd find the signature of every single person on the team who helped bring it to launch. They all signed it. And they signed it before they shipped a single unit. And they signed it even though they weren't all in the marketing department. Steve Jobs' signature is there, maybe a little larger than others, but everybody signed it. And I feel like there's a metaphorical version of that in everything that we do. If our extended teams really think about themselves as part of the extended brand team, we can punch a lot harder than our weight. We can deliver better customer experiences. I want to close with a quote from Hiroki Asai, who was part of the Apple team for a long time. He really tried to challenge himself to use humor as a way to unlock his teams to think creatively. And I just love this quote of his technique, that fear kills creativity, and humor is our most powerful tool to drive fear out of the system. So I have loved being time with you. I got a chance to draw a cartoon specifically for MoEngage. And for my next trick, hyper-personalized customer engagement. And after this, there are T-shirts that have been made connected to this drawing. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to be here.